I serve only the Lord of the Mark, Theoden, king, son of Thengel, answered Eomer. We do not serve the power of the Black Land far away, but neither are we yet at open war with him. And if you are fleeing from him, then you had best leave this land. There's trouble now on all our borders, and we are threatened. But we desire only to be free, and to live as we have lived, keeping our own, and serving no foreign lord, good or evil. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today I bring you all an epic character history on Eomer Eodig, the King of Rohan. Related and helpful articles will be in the description and cards for more information, so please check those out. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me today. It means a lot to me. Let's begin our tale. Eomer, son of Eomund and Theodwyn of the House of Eorl, was born in 2991 of the Third Age. He was the older brother of Eowyn, and while his parents still lived, they surely dwelt in the Eastmark of Rohan, most likely in the town that Eomer would later call his home, Aldburg, which had been the original capital of Rohan in Eorl's day. The name Eomer would most closely mean horse famous in Old English and the tongue of the Rohirrim. His father Eomund would be the third Marshal of the Riddermark, meaning he was one of the three most influential commanders of the Riders of Rohan, and he was the leader of the Rohirrim in the Eastmark. While Eomer and Eowyn were still young, Eomund pursued a band of orcs to the edge of the Emyn Muil on the eastern side of Rohan, and there he was ambushed by a strong force. Eomund was slain in the battle in 3002, and Theodwyn fell ill and passed away soon after. Eomer and Eowyn were orphaned, and orcs were truly to blame for all of this coming to pass, which would surely drive Eomer's personal animosity against the orcs as he grew to be a strong warrior among men. But the niece and nephew of the King Theoden, whose sister was Theodwyn, were not totally forlorn. Theoden King would adopt the both of them as if they were his own children, and Eomer and Eowyn would grow to be a true son and daughter of kings. Indeed, Theodred, son of Theoden and second Marshal of the Mark, and Eomer would see one another as brothers. Eomer would grow into manhood, being nearly 6 feet and 6 inches tall, brandishing his sword Guthwine in battle upon his steed Firefoot. I dare say this blonde-haired, valiant rider among men must have been likened to the image of King Eorl the Young of old. When Eomer became a man full-grown, he took up command of the Rohirrim in the Eastmark like his father, being the third Marshal of the Mark. He called Aldburg his home and defended the eastern parts of Rohan mostly from the orcs of Mordor. Other than Theodred and Eowyn, Eomer was the most loyal person to Theoden King in all the Mark. But even he would fall from favor in Theoden's eyes once the treacheries of Grima Wormtongue worked in the mind of the king. Still, Eomer would follow his heart and defend Rohan, no matter the edicts of the royal court. Indeed, this would make Eomer, along with his cousin Theodred, who defended western Rohan from Saruman, the two biggest targets of Isengard. In 3018, when Eomer was 27 years old, one of his good friends, Boromir of Gondor, would pass through Rohan on his way north to Rivendell, and he would speak to Eomer, telling of his dark dreams, and Eomer would lend him a horse that would come back riderless. Eomer would later remark to Aragorn that Boromir reminded him more of his own people than the grave men of Gondor, and he knew that Boromir would show his valor as a great captain when the time came. The next year, in 3019, after Theodred fell at the fords of Isen and Eomer was the heir of the kingship, Eomer and his Rohirrim hunted a band of orcs that came from the valley of Emyn Muil against the law of Theoden King, for Eomer suspected the treachery of Grima and an alliance between Saruman and Sauron, Isengard, and Mordor. Thus his folk from the Eastmark hunted down and destroyed this horde of orcs, surrounding them near the eaves of Fangorn and slaughtering them at dawn, even after using tactics with fire that made their force look bigger and like they were everywhere, and by picking off orcs throughout the night. Surely these strategies were plans of Eomer himself, who would slay the leader of the orc band, Ugluk. The bodies of the orcs were piled and burned. In the morning they met 3 hunters, a man of the north, an elf, and a dwarf. Eomer almost came to blows with the dwarf and elf, yet the man, who bore the veiled appearance of kings of ancient days, made peace between them. They introduced themselves as Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, and they would speak of their recent adventures, of Gandalf and Boromir, and of the 2 halflings they sought. Eomer reassured the 3 hunters of Rohan's allegiance not being to Mordor, against rumors of which the 3 hunters had heard. Eomer lamented the losses of Boromir and Gandalf, and gave the 3 permission to keep looking for their friends, even providing 2 horses to them, Hasufel and Arod. During this exchange, Eomer would insult Lady Galadriel, and Gimli would hardly ever let him live this down, wanting to teach him manners concerning her throughout the rest of their friendship in The Lord of the Rings. Eomer had been amazed that they had come such a distance across Rohan on foot, and he named Aragorn Wingfoot, and longed to draw swords alongside Aragorn and his Andúril. Indeed, he said, after they finished seeking for their friends, they should return the steeds to Edoras and present themselves to Theoden, for Eomer was breaking another policy of the king by letting strangers roam across Rohan unabated. After this exchange, Eomer would return to Edoras himself, only to be arrested for his actions and for threatening Wormtongue. But Gandalf would return from death and would come to Edoras alongside the three hunters and release Theoden from Grima's corruption. Eomer would also be released and would rally to his uncle and king's call to go to war, after also giving advice on the fate of Grima. He would ride with Theoden's company towards Isengard, sharing a steed with Gimli and agreeing that if he ever saw Lady Galadriel, he would name her the fairest of ladies, or their friendship would end. And so the riders went forth towards Isengard, until a scout turned them aside, warning of a great force that broke Erkenbrand's defense of the fords, and Erkenbrand, the Lord of Helm's Deep, could not be found. Thus Eomer went with his lord, folk, and friends to Helm's Deep and the Hornburg, fighting in the great battle that happened there. Anduril and Guthwine would be drawn in battle together, and would inspire the fighting men. In a sortie during the battle, Eomer would have been slain if not for the axe of Gimli that came out from the darkness and saved him from the orcs. He, Gimli, Gamling, and some others would be pushed back during the battle, in the deep, towards and into the glittering caves. At dawn, Gandalf would bring Erkenbrand's forces and end the battle, and Eomer would go on with Theoden and the others to speak to Saruman at Isengard, and Eomer's willpower would be strong enough to overcome the fair words and voice of Saruman the Wizard, and he would know him for the villain he was. After this, the war in Rohan was nigh over, but Eomer would still play a large role in the rest of the War of the Ring against the forces of Mordor. He would be saddened at the departure of Aragorn from the company of the Rohirrim, but would continue alongside Theoden to the muster of the Rohirrim and Dunharrow, and onwards to Gondor. He gave counsel to Theoden in matters involving the Druedain, or Woses, for the men of the woods would aid the Rohirrim in getting to Minas Tirith with time before the city fell. Thus Eomer was one of the great leaders of the riders during the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and after Theoden was slain by the Witch King, and Eowyn avenged her uncle, Theoden hailed Eomer as the new king of the Mark, and bade farewell to his heir and son of choice. Eomer honored Theoden with mighty words, and had his body carried from the battle to the city. And after looking at the knights who fell also, he saw her, his sister amongst the slain. Thinking her dead, he became fey, and a madness took hold. "Death!" Eomer, Ealhmund's son, cried, and he and his band went forth into the battle, slaying many, but getting themselves surrounded. He would be saved by Hirluin of the Green Hills and Imrahil, the prince of Dol Amroth. Seeing the black ships come up the river Anduin, Eomer almost despaired before seeing the banner of King Elessar, his friend Aragorn. Thus they were met on the field of battle, Eomer and he who he had once named Wingfoot, and the two would see each other again in the Houses of Healing afterwards. Learning that Eowyn had not perished, Eomer was there when Aragorn healed and saved her, and Gandalf would give Eomer more wisdom about the trials and hardships of his own sister's life, and that her courage matched his at least, in a battle within the mind that she fought, of which Eomer had known not. After this, it fell to Eomer to lead his Rohirrim during the remaining days of the war, and he would be present in the Council of Captains and the decision to fight at the Black Gate, to give Frodo and Sam a chance to destroy the ring. Eomer led the Rohirrim that would come, and he followed his friend Aragorn once more, coming at last to victory over Sauron in the end, on March 25th of 3019. Eomer's parents were truly avenged in that moment, for the master of those orcs who had slain Eomund, which had led to Theodwyn's eventual passing as well, was defeated. After the war, Eomer attended the celebrations of the West and the coronation of Aragorn. He would go on to renew the Oath of Eorl to Aragorn and Gondor, swearing an everlasting friendship between their two kingdoms, just as Aragorn also had renewed the Oath of Gondor to Rohan. Soon Eomer and Eowyn would return to Rohan to prepare the funeral of Theoden King, whose body remained then in Minas Tirith, until such a time that they returned to bring his body back to Rohan, and a large company of great heroes among men, elves, dwarves, and hobbits accompanied that procession. With the traditions of Rohan, Theoden was laid to rest, and Eomer was officially made King of Rohan, and he announced his sister's betrothal to Faramir, brother of Boromir and Prince Steward of Gondor. During the feast, he would see Galadriel and remark to Gimli that, in fact, she was not the fairest lady he had seen, for instead, Arwen was that. And Gimli accepted that answer, not needing to fight Eomer in the end. After the feast, Eomer and Eowyn honored Merry Brandybuck, who of all hobbits most aided Rohan. They named him Holdwina, meaning loyal friend. and gave him an ancient horn of the Mark. After this, and into the last years of the Third Age, and the years of the Fourth, Eomer would be a mighty and fair king of his people, earning the epithet Eadig, meaning the Blessed. He would often fulfill his oath of friendship to Aragorn and Gondor by aiding them in battles in the south and east of Middle-earth. In 3021, he would marry the daughter of his friend Prince Imrahil of Gondor, Princess Lathiriel, the cousin of Faramir and Boromir. They would eventually have a son named Elfwine the Fair, who bore a striking resemblance to Prince Imrahil, his grandfather. Under Eomer Eadig's rule, Rohan would return to prosperity, likely being greater than it ever had been before. But age would catch up with Eomer, as it does all men. After years of staying in touch with Master Holdwina, Merry Brandybuck, and sending gifts to him from Rohan, Eomer called for his friend and knight to visit him one last time. Merry and Pippin would journey southward, and the two hobbits would be there during Eomer's final days in Middle-earth, in the autumn of 63 of the Fourth Age. He was 93 years old when he had passed away, and had ruled for 65 years, longer than any other king of Rohan besides Aldor the Old, who had ruled for 75 years. Eomer's son Elfwine would succeed him, and would surely be a good king in the footsteps of his father. In the end, Eomer, a champion of Rohan, a blessed man and a glorious king, left quite a legacy and departed the world with Rohan being in a better place than it had been in when he was first born. In the halls of his fathers after his life, there was surely no shame for Eomer Eadig, son of Eomund and Theodwyn. And so we come to the end of our tale. From the story of Eomer, we see that, though we suffer hardships, we may find friends and allies in most unexpected places, and must work with such folk for a better tomorrow. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this video on Eomer Eadig. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts, questions, additions, and corrections on Eomer and his story? I've been wanting to make this video for quite a long time, and I'm glad I could finally tell Eomer's story as it happens in the books. He is quite a valiant hero. I want to shout out our Valar tier patrons: Adrian de la Torre, Chris Ortner, Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putman, Mark Kralik, Blair Scout, and Tobias Goldner, Merton, John Hume, Tom Bombadil, Reggie93, Jennifer Wood, Sam McBee, Matt Sabatch, Quantum Catalyst, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, and Ben Gardner. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our patrons. It means a lot. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the free peoples today. And I'll see you all again on Wednesday with a live stream at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and next Sunday with a video on what happened during the Great Plague of Middle-earth. Everyone, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.